Hello, and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. The How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Michael Frew. He's an acquisition entrepreneur, and we're going to have a great time. We'll talk about making the migration from the engineering world to being an acquisition entrepreneur, and we'll get into a couple cool topics here. Thank you for being on the show today.
It's great to be here. I learned a ton from your show in the past. It's quite an honor and a surprise to be able to do this. So thanks again.
Awesome. Let's take a step and go back to, you've already told me your origin story. We've kind of had a nice conversation already. But for the audience sake, how did the running jokes always, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times, how you were born and now you ended up on a show about mergers and acquisitions. How in the hell did you end up here? Tell me how you ended up on a show about buying and selling companies. Let's just kind of do your origin.
Absolutely. So I'll bore you by telling you the same story again, I guess. But yeah, thanks for chatting with me before this. I think like a lot of your listeners, I'm an ex-engineer, ex-developer. Did 18 years kind of that corporate role, starting as a junior developer and working my way up from there. And like a lot of us, you kind of get pushed off the box in many ways where you get pushed into management. And that can, and for a lot of us, not be as much fun. And reached that point where I had a quarter life crisis where, I just didn't want to do this anymore. But then you fall back into it because this is what we study. This is what we enjoy doing. And we kind of don't think we can do anything else as well. So I kept coming back into tech. I would do a different role, maybe work a different management position, quit again, try and find something else to do. So somewhere in there as I'm approaching 20 years, I've been doing consulting, did some information security. Somewhere in there, I stumbled on the idea of acquisition entrepreneurship, but mainly for online businesses. There's quite a good amount of information out there about acquiring offline businesses. But back when I looked at it, so it's about 2014, 2015, this world was kind of new. People were just figuring out, how do you sell businesses? How is that ecosystem even going to work? And acquired my first business. It was just a 5-figure business back in 2015. I realized, this is exactly what I want to be doing. Done with the corporate career. Now I'm in charge of my own projects. And so for the past 8 or 9 years, been running them, acquiring myself, and just kind of buying businesses and projects that I thought would be fun to run. So I'm my own boss. I get to build my team the way that we all want to work. And I've just been going from there. So that's hopefully a quick origin story for you.
Yeah. So what type of, are these SaaS companies, or are they just a whole variety of stuff? What type of, kind of give us an example of the acquisitions you've made.
Yeah, absolutely. So I looked at everything, right? Because I wasn't smart enough at first really to say, all right, so here's what my specialty is. Because what's kind of cool when you look at all the broker listings and everything, there's so many interesting businesses out there to acquire. So I've bought content, I've bought affiliate, I've bought e-com, SaaS software. And over time, I started to realize like my background and what I enjoyed doing was I really enjoy working with other engineers. So this kind of rolled me into the SaaS software side. Not that the other ones aren't fun or exciting. And I think a lot of engineers can do really well, especially if you're in the marketing and if you're making content and stuff that's very data driven. So there's a lot of different ways that we can all move in that space. But for me, I've settled pretty much on SaaS software. I'm really into cloud infrastructure, engineering tools, engineering services, stuff that's interactions with other engineers. So it helps make me feel like I'm still young, still in the business. I love on the customer service side where the people I'm speaking with are maybe a few years behind me, kind of moving their way up in the junior to senior ranks. So for me, that's my specialty.
Awesome. And then, so are you primarily, your holdings now are SaaS, or you still have some of the other ones still, legacy ones?
Yeah, I kept a couple of them. And so they just run on the side, low priority, I guess you could say. But yeah, my larger acquisitions are all SaaS now. So I run 3 companies. I bought 4 I bought 2 6 figures and 2 7 figures. And then I've sold one of the 7 figures. So I run the 3 right now, and, certainly enough to keep me busy, but also to build that lifestyle that I enjoy.
Yeah. So what does it look like? What's your, I've had a few people on here that have acquired SaaS companies. I've had a few people on here that have done SaaS holding companies. I like the idea. I'm a big fan of recurring revenue. Prior to getting in this space, I was a real estate investor. I still own a bunch of real estate. So the whole I want to work once and get paid over and over again appeals to me to that extent. But I'm also knowing that I've never really been good at programming. I jokingly call myself a functional programmer, and everybody's like, "Oh, you do C?" Like, dating myself there. But, no, I write it until it functions and does exactly what I want it to do, and then I like, anybody else that, like, tries to use it, it doesn't work because they don't do the exact use case that I wrote it to do, right? I can write in a few languages, but it's just been so long since I did it. So I stay away from the SaaS and other stuff just because I don't even know enough about it anymore to have a really good BS meter, right? That was something that I'm a big fan of. If I'm gonna own something or be around it, I need to be able to skim through the code or whatever and it's like, "You know what? That's not 8 hours worth of work, and you're not
Yeah.
something else is going on here." That's the reason I've stayed away from, like, the SaaS model, but it appeals to me in the realm of if you treat the customers right, they pay every month. So, what's your if you're out there looking and what appeals to you as a buyer for a SaaS company or any digital asset where you're like, "I'm gonna put this in my portfolio." What are the
Yeah.
things you look for?
Absolutely. And I have a phrase, I call myself a C minus developer. I was just incredibly average. And so it doesn't mean you don't have to be an A player to be able to be successful in this. Really, you just need to be able to understand, like you said, do I have a BS meter to understand what I'm looking at? And can I coach and manage other people that would be the A players to run it? And that is probably one of the first things I look for is can I find a team typically at the size that I'm acquiring? So I'm looking for something that maybe has 500,000 to 2 million in revenue. Typically that business is going to be run by the original developer or maybe the small team.
Mm,
So if they're looking to sell, they're probably going to leave the business. So you have to replace them and you factor that into the price and everything. But you're looking at, okay, how easy is this to replace? I've acquired a business where the original owner it was a little bit more his ability than I realized, in the sense that Oprah's company isn't worth anything because it's about Oprah. And so I acquired that business and realized we couldn't replicate who he was. And so now I look for what is something that a new engineer can come in and run this without having the original owner in there once they teach them. So that's important to me. I'm looking for projects that I think are fun. I always think because I run a lot of cloud infrastructure companies, I say I'm not out here curing cancer, but a lot of our companies are. And so it's really nice to be a part of that ecosystem. I love working with engineers, like I said earlier. So those are the kind of the things that I'm looking at as kind of the soft pieces of the business. And then there's the obvious parts of what's the revenue, what's the churn, what are the metrics, but we all look at that for due diligence.
yeah.
I'm looking for the projects I used to work on in corporate America, the really cool ones that you liked. And you're like, man, I wish I was running that at my house. That'd be so neat. And then I can ignore all those terrible projects that we hate going to the meetings and all of that. I don't touch those. So yeah, a lot of it's a bit of a feel when you see it. This is something I'd like to run. This is an engineer I feel like we could replace successfully. And then now let's look at the metrics.
Yeah, I was watching an interview where Elon was telling everybody that, Elon Musk said, "If you're at one of my meetings and you don't feel like you're either contributing to it or getting something from it, you're supposed to get up and walk out." And I was like, "Oh, how many times did I wish I could have done that in the corporate world," right? I was bad. I used to send invoices. So if somebody made me come to the meeting, I'd take a mental note of everybody in there, and I would tell my administration, like I was at the director level, I had 2 or 3 administrative assistants. I would tell one of them, say, "This is the people," and then I'm like, "Write up an invoice and send it over to me. I'll put in the numbers." And I kinda knew by what they did, what their salary was, and I would send that invoice to the guy that called the meeting. "This is what the meeting cost. This is what your meeting cost
Yeah.
our company." Right?
Yep.
And some of these meetings are tens of thousands of dollars. If you look at all
Yeah.
like, they have 15, 20 engineers in there that are making 100 something grand, and we were there for 2.5 hours. It was an expensive meeting.
And that's absolutely perfect in the sense of how we were treated, both as engineers by our teams and our managers. And you think, if I'm ever the boss, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So now, by doing this acquisition entrepreneurship, I can now make a team where we don't have standing meetings. In fact, I never met my main engineer in maybe 3 or 4 years before we even met. And that was just for social, like it wasn't even for work. And
Yeah.
that was kind of the environment that I wanted to make. It was basically remote before it was a thing. And so, yeah, even thinking about that Musk meeting of how much time and money because I know how much I'm paying my team to waste their time just telling me the same story every week. There's just no reason to do that.
Yeah, I get that. Let's talk about, so we know you're looking for projects that are interesting to you. They have the what about the market conditions? Like, I just looked at a company, and I won't say who it is on here because all the NDA and stuff, but, they had made some major changes in their companies. Basically, the company was because of their changes, they'd lost a they're not producing the revenue they used to, right?
Right.
They changed the entire way they manage their company, and then the market had become more competitive. So now the changes are in place, and now they wanna sell it. So, like, they just had 2 years of declining revenue, and they went in a world where when they first started, they're the only person doing it, and now there's dozens and dozens of competitors that are like so now they're competing against these other people, and one of the reasons we did the first call, and I love both the, owners. They were just amazing women that had created this business. It was originally doing 2.5 million a year, had decent profit margins. Now it's down to just under 1 million after 2 years. Like last year's 1.7. Now it may be around 1 million this year. But they say it's going to turn around. It's going to turn around like the eternal optimism of an entrepreneur. We fixed everything. We're selling it to you now. You should pay it what it was worth 3 years ago because
Right.
now that we got it running, we'll be right back there. Like that was that. But the other side of it was in my own mind, and I'm a problem solver. I really believe I can solve problems. I didn't see a solution where I could carve off a niche in that market and say, "This is mine." And competitive advantage, moat, whatever you wanna call it. I call it my moat. I wanna build something where there's some barrier to entry to people getting inside of my bubble because I wanna put eventually, my goal is to put an operator in there, and then I buy the next one, and I come back, and we do board meetings, and we check on things regularly, but I'm not constantly having to, like, watch the competition, constantly having to do everything because 'cause we've got some barrier there. And this one, I just didn't see how to carve off something that was theirs.
Uh,
So
Coming around can be tough. And you're exactly right. There's a real challenge with, and I understand the feeling when sellers have something that has started to decline
mhm.
but there is a lot of potential. And so they want to be paid for the potential. And the other side of that is sometimes they want to be paid for the work they've put into it. I've spent $120,000 in my own hours, so it's worth $120,000.
Not how
These
that
are
works, but yeah.
tough. These are tough conversations to have with sellers to kind of walk them back to, you have to help them see from my point of view and your point of view as a buyer. So I'm looking at this. If I'm going to be putting this much money in, like, when do I get my money back? How do I make this grow? Like you said, you're a problem solver. What can we do to make this better? Because, worst case is we just keep going in the same direction that we're going with you. So those can be tough questions. There are a lot of people in this industry that specialize in those kind of turnaround situations. And that's pretty awesome to be able to rescue a business that you can do really well. And you open this a little bit with, what's the environment like right now? And things have changed. So we're talking, it's October 2023 right now. Things have really changed. Most of my career, so I've been in this about 8, 9 years. I would say certainly the last 3 or 4 has been a seller's market, right? There was tons of cash. Everyone was looking for somewhere to put cash because the yields were so low. And this was a market that people were starting to flood into. That has really changed with the rise in interest rates. So we're starting to switch to a little bit more of a buyer's market where sellers are starting to learn that, right? In 2022, sellers kind of didn't want to believe it. So there was a bit of a stalemate, buyers and sellers. We're now starting to see buyers are able to get a little bit of leverage, work those multiples down just a tad. I don't know how long that will last or if it will just level out. That's a little bit of what I've seen. SaaS is usually one of the higher multiples compared to like content or e-commerce. And so as always, as a buyer, I'm trying to figure out how do I either get the multiple down a little bit or a turnaround scenario, like you said, where that higher multiple, I can bring it down because I will do well with
That multiple was crazy almost a year and a half ago. It's come under control to some extent since then, I think
it. Did
anyway.
become it became a question of like, how am I going to keep doing this? Right. So I'm used to, am I just being stuck in the sand of like, well, here's multiples that I've been paying the last 8 years. And now we've moved up here. Can I keep doing this career or should I just sell everything and go find something else to do? But now some sanity has come back. And I
Yeah,
guess that's what the Fed is trying to do is get some of that optimism and bubble out of
maybe. I'm not a big
it.
fan
Yeah.
of
Who
we're
knows
not
what
gonna
they're
talk
trying
about
to do?
yeah. I'm not sure they know what they're doing, but we're not gonna cover
Yeah.
politics on here. That's not what we do.
We definitely
Um
don't need to do that.
Yeah. Let's go back to the SaaS thing. I'm really curious about what does it look like as far as, like, when you look at these things, does tech stack matter? Do you look at something and go, "I don't even know that language," because a lot of people don't get theirs. If you're not an engineer, you're not a technical person like you are, and that I used to be, I'm not so much anymore, but there are 1,000 different programming languages, 3 or 4 that are probably popular in common, but those aren't the same ones that are popular in common 6 years ago when these people start writing these apps. Does it matter, or do you look at it and go, "It's running, it's smooth, I can find engineers that know that language." Is that all that matters to you? What matters as far as tech stack goes?
Well, I hate to use the it depends answer. I have encountered a business that I bought that had that problem, exactly like you said. So it was a language that's a little bit older, a little bit clumsier, and it's not anywhere near what languages that are coming out now. So I did encounter the problem that the only people that knew that language that were real experts were kind of concentrated geographically in one space. English was not the first language. So if you think about customer service, this was a technical business. So the challenge was my customers would write to me, the people that are writing back, it's very difficult for them to explain how to fix things. So in that case, the language did matter. The tech stack did matter.
Was it
One of the
COBOL
reasons
or what
I,
was it, Fortran?
I don't want to like make anybody mad because people do get pretty serious about their languages. Um, for our tech stack, well, at least what I was trying to do is with the multiple companies, if I can have engineers that are all on the same tech stack, even if the front marketing and it looked like completely different companies, on the bottom, we're all using Ruby and Golang or something like that, then we can all work on the same thing. And that's kind of what I've been looking for. Now you have to kind of expand on that as like you said, things change over time, but it is nice versus saying, hey, let's go buy a WordPress site. And now all of a sudden I need a PHP person. That's a complete departure from the direction that I'm usually going. So that I might actually walk away from it just because of the tech stack.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know PHP. It's the one of the very few.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it a
I'll
programming
give you a
language. It's
call if
more of
one
a
of those pops up.
it's probably more of a scripting language. That's the type of sites I buy, though. I buy, WordPress blogs
Yeah.
and that type of stuff. I've written for some pretty hefty websites in PHP. I spent some serious money building out sites that were built on that. This is before Ruby came out, though, so that was kinda the end thing to do back then. I've been kinda also known for, like, I'm not interested in big, expensive hardware stuff, so if you've got they don't even exist anymore, but, like, back in the day when Sun Microsystems was in every daggum data center that was overpriced and Linux machines would outperform them.
Yeah. And that's another thing. Like you have to find that community that runs that. And you have to look at, so what is that pay expectation? It is a lot easier to find a Ruby programmer maybe than somewhere in the Microsoft tech stack. So it is something if you're replacing, like we said in the beginning, if you're replacing the developer, you really have to look at how expensive is that going to be to get a, let's say a B to an A plus player in there to make sure it's run really well. So
Yeah,
yeah, I might move my it depends answer to, yeah, it kind of does matter.
yeah. I'm trying to think. The the tech stacks, we talk about the tech stack, we talk about, like, kind of the business in general, like, what it is that, you're looking for. What about if you're inheriting the team, do you buy companies where the team comes with it? Or I guess those seven-figure acquisitions, they probably came with a team, right, of 10 or 12 developers or
In the SaaS space, a lot of times you can have a single developer that scales with just that person and maybe one customer. So yeah, sometimes bringing on one or two people. That is one of the great things about if you can find a good software company where every customer doesn't require a new sales rep on the internal side and it's a set up once and run forever situation. You can have very small teams. But yes, if you do have a team that comes in, so you have to be able to absorb that into the group, definitely one of your responsibilities. And at least for me personally, one of the things you want, or I guess one of the things that I want when I'm speaking with a seller is this is something that's probably one of their babies, right? They have worked on this for a long time. Almost every business I bought, I think every business I bought, the seller actually did not want to sell. Something else positive had happened in their life. One of them got a job at a company that he really wanted to go to. One of them had his startup funded, and all of a sudden he had to divest everything. So in many ways, they weren't really dying to sell it. They just had to. So they care about who's taking over as a buyer, kind of my story is like, listen, we're going to take care of your team. We understand where you're trying to go with this project and we like your customers. Here's some other companies that I have that are also dealing with the same customers. Read our reviews. Like, hopefully they're happy as well. And what you want to try and say is like, I'm going to take your baby and move it up that business chain here. And it kind of goes from the person that takes it from 0 to 1. Then Michael Frew shows up. I take it maybe from 1 to 10. Then I look for somebody like Big Man Software, right? And so they're looking for 1 to 10, 1 to 10. I'm 1 to 2. They think they're 1 to 10, and then they're going to maybe find a PE firm that's 10 to 100. And that's kind of how we go up that chain. But I'm trying to help sellers that are technical business, got to sell it. Just need that next person to take it and add some marketing, make it scalable, move it to that next spot.
awesome, awesome. I've interviewed a few of those guys out there, the big band guys and I've interviewed the guys that Unfolio, I think is one of them that's public
Yep.
now,
Yep. Yeah.
and some of the other guys out there. Similar stories, but they're looking for the bigger things, right? They're looking
Yeah.
for bigger targets. I like that my curiosity, what you said, it's a 1 or 2 man thing. If you're down to 1 or 2 men and you got other, because that's your biggest expense in any of this,
Mhm.
is the manpower. The reason I go after podcast, services, pre and post, newsletters and blogs is because the profit margin's insane. A lot of people don't believe
Yeah.
me when I tell them that a good newsletter and blog that's actually producing revenue runs, if it's running less than 75% profit margin, they're messing it up and they're doing something wrong.
Doing something wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. They can run at 80, 90, 95% because you really only need a good writer and somebody that knows SEO and maybe a tech guy. And I tend to be my own tech guy. So somebody to fix the DNS on the server or something weird if you have to move the site. But you can bring those guys in, or like for me, I know that stuff well enough. I do it. Your SaaS software, if you only got 1 or 2 people, what's your profit margin you look at for some of these? Are they high? Is a high profit
Yeah,
margin business?
it is. And so so if you're saying 75, so if I'm in the 60 to 65, because I'm adding that extra kind of talented engineering team in
Yeah.
there, I'm pretty happy with that, which again, we see
Almost
grocery
unheard of.
stores and yeah, you see all these other brick and mortar things that are talking 1 to 3 to 5%. But it's unbelievable what we get to do in software. And you made me think of a way to kind of relate this to your audience, especially of the developers and engineers. There is what I would call maybe an unsweet spot to sell your business where it's the one engineer and they're making enough money. I'm just gonna throw out a number, 100,000 a year. Trying to sell your business there where me as a buyer now needs to put a new engineer in there. That's going to cut out a lot of that profit. But if you are already a developer and engineer and you're looking to leave your corporate career and you could take this on and like, this is your job. So you're again saying you're making 100,000, you're taking that spot and you can move it up to a point where then someone like me could buy it, where I'm going to put a team in there. I think that's an excellent off ramp from the corporate career is find a business that you could run. Now all of a sudden tech stack matters and a project that you like.
Yeah,
But if you can find that business, you save the money to be able to acquire it. That's a really cool off ramp that I've seen engineers try and do and say like, all right, I can just do this and I don't have to worry about that hiring new people thing. I'll train somebody to sell it later in a couple of years. So hopefully that helps for a couple listeners out there that there is that. It's a bad spot for me as an acquirer, but it's a sweet spot for engineers trying to look to move.
it would be a great spot. There's a lot of people out there who flip websites. They go in and they flip, but I think there's a space out there for an engineer coming out of some place and like taking on these projects that are just doing, say, 100, 150, $200,000, acquiring it. And flipping it, basically bringing it up
Yeah.
to a level that you would be interested in selling it and taking on the next project. Now they've got new, fresh, projects, and after 2 or 3 of them, they could probably hold on to some of them, right? Now
Yeah.
they can
It's
afford.
that narrow band.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just love that, like kind of that narrow spot where you could go. And so here's what I went and got an MBA and I wasted $100,000 on it. Have I done that and actually bought a business and ran it in that small little and kind of learned and then acquire and sell and move myself out of there? It's just a really nice sweet spot for someone.
I did the same thing.
There's reasons to do the MBA, and I don't know if the direction that you went, but what made the MBA valuable was not a direction I was going in. I wasn't going into networking. I'm a very strong introvert, so for me, it wasn't about like going out into the world of marketing. It was kind of coming back and doing this where I get to work on my own with my team.
Right.
So
But
I enjoyed it, but maybe I should have bought something.
so we talked about your search. We talked about the type of companies you've acquired. Now you've acquired the company. You talked about putting key engineers in place. How do you, and you've got multiple of these, so I take it you're not 40 hours on each one of them. You're kinda overseeing the projects, you're doing
Yep.
project check-ins or weekly or biweekly calls and just checking on things as they need to be done. How do you continue to grow these? Do you guys have marketing people on staff? Do you like, how do you, like, solve "Okay, we own this thing, now how do we maximize its potential?"
Right. So I'm very much the definition of an owner operator. I actually really enjoy working on the businesses. So I'm in there quite often, more than probably a couple times a week. But you're right. So I have a marketing person that works across all of them. And so we will test on one and kind of deploy it across everything else. Engineering team that works on all of them. And each business they are unique. And I've seen, so a lot of my colleagues that work in content or even some of the Amazon e-commerce FBA, you're almost product or topic agnostic because you're applying the same formula to every single site. So you can buy 15 content sites and kind of apply that formula. It's a little bit harder to buy 15 SaaS business. So it's one at a time. And so if you're looking at software and SaaS and you see these people saying like, hey, I bought 5 businesses this year, don't let that pressure you because software, like I buy one every couple years
Hmm.
and there's an internalization process. That first quarter, we try and stay hands off and just say, all right, I'm not touching anything. I just want to see how it runs.
Right.
That's where you start getting those ideas and you see the customer stuff come in. Due diligence, I always want to read the customer service queue. But once you start getting in there and you start seeing, okay, here are feature requests that they're looking for. We all know it's easier to make money from current customers than to go out and get new ones. So we're trying to expand kind of the value of each customer and go from there. So in a weird way, the business tells you a little bit about how to grow. We can tell all the outside marketing stuff because we all kind of know our space. And like the Gumroad founder said, and I'm terrible, I can't remember his name, but a lot of times your business is going to grow based on the environment you're in. Since I'm in cloud computing, it's just growing and I don't know if it's really me or if it's just the market that's getting bigger
Right.
and I just happen to be surfing that wave. So the short answer is it really is per business to figure out what might be the best way to do it. But yeah, I've got a team that kind of works across horizontally. So in a way, each business is legally structured by itself, and then the team works on each one and kind of as a unit.
So you and I both worked at Lockheed. When you worked at Lockheed, did you work on multiple projects?
Good.
Did you have the billing where you had to like record the hours per project? You remember that? Like the time card you fill out and say, I put 6 hours on this project and 15 hours on this project. You remember that?
And they had to teach me how to do it. And so to go back to our earlier conversation of how I don't want to set up my company, everyone just says like, I did 40 hours, right? And I
Okay.
don't need you to break it down by project and
That's what I was gonna
everything like
ask. That's
that.
where I was leading with this.
Yeah.
Yep, yep, yep.
And it's scars from corporate life that we just don't want. And
Mhm.
life has changed, right? So you and I, of course, we're both 27 years old. Somehow we snuck a earlier career in there. And it is, I mean, corporate life, especially back then, is very different. It has gotten easier. And I have not been in the remote work world that has kind of exploded over the last few years. But I can imagine it's not quite as strict as it was before, but
Mhm.
still, I want to make it as flexible. You don't have to ask me for vacation. Just check in while you're on vacation in case we have an emergency, stuff like that. But yeah, it's trying making the business as flexible as possible, but still getting everything done. It's a challenge for me at the top to help put that culture out there.
And these are salaried roles by chance? Like they're just on a
Uh,
salary and they're
Contractors salaried, yeah, contractors salaried hourly. And again, it depends on the role.
right.
Probably like a lot of people, you start, all right, let's do maybe a per project cost, and then let's do hourly. And then if, as you prove yourself, okay, now we trust you, don't have to watch you anymore. You don't even have to file hours. Like
Yeah.
just here's your goal and just run and just let me know how it's going.
I'm pretty laid back too, like, for the people who work for me, like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
need vacation this weekend." I was like, "I haven't chatted with
Cool,
you.
man.
I haven't sent you we
Yeah.
haven't sent a message back and forth to each other in the last 4 days. I
Yeah.
wouldn't know if you were on vacation already or not." So, long as like, if I look in there and everything's getting done, that's all I really care about,
Yeah.
right?
And
Um,
I love asynchronous work. And
yeah.
so again, going back to like try not to do meetings, we, especially with technology customers, we do have companies that as soon as they have a question, hey, can we set up a meeting or a phone call? And I push back and we have a template of, we just don't do that. That's not our culture.
Mhm,
We can solve everything via email because I can get the most eyes on it and I can get the correct eyes on it.
mhm.
If everybody stops their role, we sit down for a meeting and Joe isn't in the meeting, then we're all wasting our time. So we also push back really hard to like, let's do everything as asynchronous as possible. Everybody's global. So trying to make that kind of a work culture. But
Yep.
that's something that I'm interested in building just because I've done this acquisition thing. You can run your business any way you want, which is again makes it pretty neat.
You're about the 2nd or 3rd person who's got me semi-sold to getting back into the SaaS thing. I like the recurring revenue model of it.
Yeah, it's
I
yeah.
think that with the right one, I'd only really need 1, maybe maybe a full-time and a part-time type of engineer level people. So other than that, it wouldn't change for most of what I'm doing, right? I always kinda thought of these if they're doing 4 or 5 million, I need a 10 people on my team, right?
And there's some people like if you're doing interior B2B sales, that
Yeah.
makes sense. If you're doing something scalable like we're doing, where you sign up once and then we honestly don't have to communicate again, then I don't know what I would do with three more people other than, I guess, like, hey, try and go sell more. But, I'm not sure that would have a return.
Do the businesses you own have any cross-selling and overlap, like, where you can take a mailing list from one of them and sell services to your others?
Yeah, unfortunately, they don't. There's a little bit of cross, and I've always looked for that, and like a perfect strategic acquisition of what would we bolt onto this that would be an easy sell, to kind of increase that customer value. I've just not been fortunate enough to find it yet. I know it's out there, but at the moment, no. But that doesn't mean people shouldn't find it. There's
There's a
definitely some spots where that would work.
I don't wanna we don't throw shade on anybody in here, so I don't wanna, like, how do I word this? There's a company I interviewed that had acquired over 10 similar companies in the last 2 years, and they acquire them because they have cross-selling and upselling abilities that's adding features, but I used their product for a little while, and they didn't integrate any of it in, so you had to sign up for one, and sometimes you got free access to one of the others, but you had to pay for this, but it was all kind of still a
Kludgy.
patchwork quilt kind of
Yeah,
you had to do your own zaps and stuff to make them work together, and I'm like, "Why did you acquire all these if you don't give me a good, what it
yeah.
I don't want an
Experience
API, I
there.
want you to hook them together. You have both the APIs, you write." I'd be okay with, like, "Hey, if you want this to work with this, download this app, we already wrote it." That would be fine, right? Here's a bridge app, like, that you
Yep,
need to make these work together, but they didn't do any of it. So,
yep,
like, I went back to the tool I was using. But I was thinking, like, it's brilliant. They've acquired all these companies, and it's like they're buying companies that, like, they have one that has hundreds of thousands of users that all need a feature that this company only had 5,000 users. So they start selling and emailing those the 100,000 users, "Hey, we've got this new feature you needed." But they make it hard to use.
and the usability is terrible, and it reflects really poorly on the company. And
Well,
so that's part of that 6 months that you would spend, like, looking at it. How is this gonna work? And so hopefully you're thinking that on the acquisition side.
I looked at it not even hard to use. That's a little hard because once you logged into the other tool, it worked fine. But
Yeah,
I had to have a tab open for yours, the one that you sold me from, the email address I was on, and the new one I just signed up for was its own tab, and, like, they don't talk to each other. It's like
right.
different usernames, different passwords, different things. They both help with the topic that we're doing, the topic at hand, but they weren't integrated in the words of integration, so that's one of the reasons I was asking if, because that's where I was headed, like, okay, you've got companies that are cross-selling, do you integrate them into where they get somebody
Yeah,
logs
we
in
haven't had a
any
perfect semblance. I've looked at even acquiring competitors, and the idea of, so how we have to pick one of the 2 platforms,
yeah.
right? So we assume ours is better, but then how do you get all the customers over here, and you're gonna lose 60% of them? And so that, to me, on the competitor side, we kind of shied away from that a little bit.
Some of the best companies I've seen grow, and I'm curious on your thought process on this, they grew because they constantly worked with, like, their customers, like, "What do you need next? What do you need next? What do you need next?" One of my news or both 2 of my newsletters that I own run on Substack, which is not that great, but I've got some friends that are all big on Beehive, and they keep telling me the story that Beehive started off that way. They were just a couple engineers that built a tool that they didn't like what was out there, but they constantly people would go to them, "Hey, we needed to do this," and like, "Okay, we'll have that working by the end of the week." And they just kept adding on and building stuff that the customers wanted. The one problem I think I have with the newsletters we currently have and the, blogs that we currently run is there's just no regular interaction with the customers. I think, and maybe I know some of them, so I probably should just create a panel and reach out. And, there's a series of questions I ask every employee, and they get sick of it. Every person that works with me, all my business partners, we do it at the end of every single meeting, and it's 3 simple questions. It's how I manage everything. I boiled down managing other people down to 3 things. What are we doing really well? So we always start with a pat on our own back. So what are we doing really well? Right? Whether it's a project or the software or whatever. So the top meeting might be about the news, a particular newsletter. For us, it might be it's the hub. Okay, cool. The hub is a curated newsletter talking about mergers and acquisitions of small and medium businesses. So I'll meet with you and I'll say, what are we doing really well? We'll list the things that are working. Cool. What can we do better? Where are the places where we could make some small improvements? Right? Well, this and that, we cover all those, and then the last question is, what are we totally missing? What are other people in the market doing? What do our customers want that we don't do at all? We're missing some there's always something you're missing. And I'd love to ask those, like, pick 10 people who read the newsletters and say the same questions. What are we doing really well? Give me a pat on the back. What are we doing good? Where can we improve? Where are we? kinda hitting the mark, but we're not quite scratching that itch. What's going on? Where are those spots? And then what do you need that we may be able to do for you? Like anything, this is your brainstorming session, just throw it out. I need X, Y, and Z. What information you need? What do you need? And like, what are you missing in your life that might be beneficial if we could deliver it? If I could ask that on a monthly or quarterly basis of people who partake in my businesses, we could grow like mad, right? Do you have any interaction with
Just to get
the
that.
subscribers?
Yeah. Um, we do. So this is, and I see it in a kind of a feature request way, almost like you were talking about with Beehive. And the way you asked the missing question is so many times I've been noticed that our competitors have come out with something and we miss it because we're so internally focused. And actually, it
Mhm.
almost does come sometimes from a customer that says, "Hey, company B does this." I was like, "They do what?" And that's where we're kind of is not out there. So it's definitely a question I should be asking more. But we, boy, once you get, there's probably a tipping point of number of customers where you're going to get enough feature requests that really you're just trying to rack and stack those and then bring in our own priorities of what we think is the stuff that we see in the background of like, hey, this isn't scaling or this is going to break in about a year. So we kind of put those in the front and then we try and add those feature requests in there. But it does almost all of it comes from customers because they're the ones really using it. And just like you said, I think every business wishes they had more communication with customers. It's very hard, but I also don't want to bother my customers because I
Right.
don't appreciate it when I get a bunch of emails. So a lot of times we don't really know what they're using with a lot of our infrastructure tools. We just see that they're using the tools, but we don't know
Mhm.
how or why or what the use case is. So the more they ask us questions, we learn a ton of what people are doing. And a lot of times it's like, wow, there's a lot more blockchain going on over here than we realized, or AI is starting to use this a lot too. So for me, the customer service channel, I've spoken about this on other interviews and podcasts, how important that is to really listen. It is not, the customer service channel is not something that you need to have tickets closed as fast as possible. That's a conversation you should keep going with as much as you can, especially higher up management needs to be reading that. If you write in, half the time I'm writing back from all of the businesses. So I have found that that's one of the best selling points. It's one of the best ways to find those features, get that relationship with the customers, get testimonials, especially when things go bad. If you're really quick on the customer service part and acknowledging like, hey, there is an issue. We're trying to fix it. You're an engineer too. You know this happens. Like, just give us a minute. It really creates a good relationship. So that customer service channel is, to me, it's overlooked in some companies, and there's other companies that do it really well. But I would encourage that. That's where the real magic sometimes can come from.
Yeah, I've actually worked at companies where they didn't do a great job communicating. I can think of one off the top of my head where the I was the senior director of operations. All the tech guys worked for me, but I wasn't the head of customer support. So when we would have an outage, I would write up exactly what happened and be straightforward, and I would send that out. But it went through like PR type of level stuff, and it went out to customer support later lady. She would re-engineer what I said, and I somehow I got a hold of him one of these days, and it was absolute total BS story. And I was
Yeah.
like, "Do you believe our customer? Like, these customers are paying multi-million dollars." We ran email service for some of the biggest email houses in the world. A lot of people don't understand how complex email actually is, but if you don't have a few million users, it's an economy of scale thing. You can't run a very efficient email system unless you have a few million users on it because because of the complexity and everything. I don't wanna get into the details here, but a lot of people outsource it, and they don't a lot of people don't know, they're like, this company did just companies like even a bunch of AOL and a bunch of other people, like, we did millions of their users were on our particular system, and I
Yeah.
was like, "These are engineers you're emailing this to and tell them why we went out. Your story's not gonna land with them." It's like she
Yeah.
would make up these stories. I was like, "Either." Like, what do you want me to do?" I said, "Be honest. Just
Yeah.
tell them what happened."
And they're the group that understands.
Yeah.
And we try and do that too, because just like you, we've been on the other side of like, this is a toll. We see when Google and Amazon, like everybody knows they're down
Yeah.
and their boards are all flashing green and Twitter's all like, dude, you guys are having issues. And then the reasons they get back. And that's another one where we're like, we don't want to be like that.
No.
When we screw up, or if it honestly is like, we're not really sure what the heck is going on, but just we'll tell you as soon as we know. We try and put together after action reports. Yeah, we're getting in the weeds of like in a pretty big tech company. But again, we hope that the customers see that. At least they know they'll always get the truth. If it was down for an hour, that really stinks, but we told you the real reason. And that's the best we can do.
Yeah, so I think that goes for a long way as far as like if the reason I even brought it up is if you're a small company and you're an engineer and you're one or two people, you don't want to be betraying trust because that I mean, in today's day and
So yeah,
time, that
yeah,
gets out so fast, right?
yep,
Even back when this was years ago when we did it, that was still not a thing you wanted to do because we were a decent sized little company, but we probably because of what we did, we probably only had 20 clients, maybe
yeah.
30, right? Because every client gave us millions of users. We didn't need that many to run a business. So, what are some of the things that we're getting close to the end of our time here. What are some of the things that
Sure.
if you're out there, if you're speaking directly to other engineers in the space that are thinking
Mhm.
about doing what you're doing, what are some of the key takeaways that what do they need to do to get started? And what are the lessons? What do you know now? I guess
Yeah,
what
yeah.
do you
No,
know
it's
now that you wish you knew back then? I guess is the where I'm going 360 degrees to get to this damn question, but what do you know right now that you wish you'd have known on day one to help these guys out? That's the way.
yeah, absolutely. And it's a little bit of why I'm even out here doing shows and podcasts. It's just the awareness that this is a career option. I think there's so much out there about trying to start your own business. And we're engineers, and a lot of us are very entrepreneurial by nature. And so we're all building. You and I probably both have hundreds of failed projects in our archives. I know I do. And I was never a good 0 to 1 person. Like I just couldn't get stuff off the ground. And I had no idea this existed, that you could go out and buy something that's already running. It's got marketing and customers and actual customers that are not your family and friends, and then take that and run it. So if you're an operational person like me, or just maybe not the greatest idea and getting it off the ground person, to be aware that this even exists. So when I bring this up to colleagues and friends, and there's engineers that live in my neighborhood here, first they're like, wow, okay, so how do I do this? And they always have kind of the same 4 questions. So I threw up on my website, and I'm sure we'll throw that at the end of the interview here. I try and answer those 4 questions that everybody asks, which is, like nobody sells a really good profitable business. Well, yes, they do. And here's why they do it. How do I finance this? How do I know what niche would be good for me? And how do I know like what I would be good at? So I try and answer those questions as if we're just kind of like this, having a conversation in
Right.
this room. And so if you can kind of walk away with that, like being aware that this exists, here's some of the easy questions to start looking at like, okay, I am going to keep trying to do my own thing and build it myself. But at the same time, I would be kind of looking around to see if there's projects or businesses that I could buy and maybe leapfrog a little bit and kind of you're almost buying momentum. So those were the things that I would love to get out to your audience of like, just be aware that this exists. It's the ecosystem is much more mature than it was when we started a few years ago. And it's becoming professionalized. And so it is the acquisition entrepreneurship is pretty professional in the brick and mortar world. We're getting there with online as well.
So I gave advice to an engineer type. It's been about 8 months now. I need to follow up with him, see what happens. He was in the exact shoes that you're talking to right now. He's like, "Hey, I've got some money saved up. I'm thinking about doing this startup, creating," and he defined the project pretty well. Good idea, but it's going to take a lot of money to get off the ground. And I said, "I'm biased." I just told him straight off, "Look, I've got cognitive bias. I've been doing the same thing for about a couple of years now. I'm going to make some suggestions to you that you may or may not like, but I'm going to do it anyway. So here's what I suggest." And I told him, "Go find a company that your business idea would be a great product addition to what they're doing. It would be an extension of their product line. Find one that's for sale or the one that would be willing to sell to you that do that." So now, because he had enough money to basically do a proof of concept and he thought he was going to raise money to go after that. I was like,
Yeah.
now you don't have to raise money. Now just make sure you've got enough profit in there that it can support building out your thing. And the reason is now you've got a company that has revenue, profit, product market fit, and trust with those customers for something that you can upsell to them as a feature later on. If you do it that way, then you'll know pretty quickly because you can do a minimum viable product. You can do an MVP, get it in front of them, and if they bite, they bite. And if they don't, you didn't have a great idea to start with because these people trust you, like you, and spend money with you already. And he liked the idea because he had enough. He had a few hundred grand saved up. Like that's a great down payment for a lot of good companies,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Find something that, and it was a software tool he wanted to build. Find something that like that would be an awesome add-on or a feature or would benefit that company for having what you want to build. And then
Yeah.
make that company pay to build it. Cause now maybe you don't take $150,000 salary for the first year. You dump the money
Right.
back into building out the thing you want to work on, but it's funded, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
I said, "You've got enough runway to pay yourself and do this for what do you say, 18 months to 2 years?" And he's like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
I said, "If you get $1, if you can do it to where you've got $1 profit off of every dollar after everything you spend, your runway's infinite." So you buy a company that's already profitable and you just like, "Oh, what does it take to build this out?" And as long as you don't ever eat up that last dollar of profit, Now you've
Yep.
got an infinite runway to figure this out. And he
Yep.
finally liked that idea because that was his big thing, runway run. I've got, I've got 18 months to 24 months. I've got to pay this one engineer to help me. And I got enough money to do this for 18 months to 24 months or whatever the number he had. And I was like, there's another solution here. Uh,
That seems like good advice.
so
Yeah.
I'm hoping I need to check back with him and
See how it went.
see how it went and see if he did.
And that is, I think that is the limiting factor here that people will encounter is it's deal flow. There are way more buyers than there are good businesses for sale. And so that is a big challenge, and don't let it discourage you. Like I said, I spend years looking for my next acquisition a lot. So if I'm working on a project I already love, like you're going to be working on that for a little bit, you can sell it if you want. Like we said, some people flip, but don't be discouraged if it takes a little while. It's probably not sitting on the shelf right away. So again, if you're looking in your mid 20s, mid 30s, you've got time to kind of find that right business and buy.
And I'll throw in there, if you haven't looked at least 20 to 30 businesses anyway, you probably
Yeah,
don't know the difference between a good one and a bad one. You'll pass up some really good businesses on accident because they didn't look like good businesses until you've seen
that's
20,
true.
30, or 40. Don't expect a software engineer who's got one person and they're doing, say, $300,000 $400,000 a year to have great QuickBooks and profit and loss statements and all the stuff that these book, you buy the books, you buy the courses, and they tell you that people should have XYZ. You can't expect that out of if you're buying a company that's one or two people because they're owner operator,
Yep.
and that's just not how it works, right? I
They're
didn't
going
learn
to
that
have
lesson
personal
this.
finances in there. Yeah, it's going to be a mess at this price range. You're
Yeah,
absolutely right. That's a really good point to bring up. Boy, don't look for that perfect thing. Is it fixable?
yeah.
That's really in your expertise come in there and kind of like I had said, make the business a little bit more mature. And then that's where you're looking for, we'll go back to the big band software, like those guys that kind of take it from there.
I picked that up on here on the show. I was interviewing one of the guys, and he's like, "So what do you look for when you buy?" And I was like, "I want good books. I want this." Like, why would you want good books? And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "You're buying companies from," and I was looking at brick and mortar companies back then before I realized that we move often enough that would be a problem. We ended up having to move unexpectedly to be near family that needed our help out in California. It's like, and I thought we were going to be where we were for a while. It's like, yeah. But we were looking at brick and mortar still, and he said, "Why are you looking for great books?" I said, "What are you talking about?" Most of these business owners don't have great books. If they do, it's because a broker bandaged them back together and made them look better, or they hired somebody to help them for the last couple of years. But if you go off market and find good businesses, look for a good business, but good business doesn't equal good books, right? Good
Boy,
book.
if they're not expecting it, yeah, their
Yeah.
books are going to be chaos,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
their CPAs would tell you.
Yeah. And a lot of people go like, "Well, books are everything. The numbers are everything." No, the numbers are everything. The books are not, right?
Yeah.
You just have to extract it. Sometimes you got to pull up bank statements and tax returns and stuff like that, and then build a profit and loss statement, a balance sheet, and your
What's
own,
really,
huh?
what's
Yeah,
really going on?
yeah. Then you can
Yes.
analyze what's really going on, but don't expect it to be all put together for you and have them do that. They don't know. They don't know how to do it. And,
Very
so,
true.
I but I appreciate having you here today. How do people reach out to you if they wanna work with you, they want more
Absolutely.
information, they want some of those videos you were talking about, how do they find those?
Yeah. So michaelfrew.com, nice and simple. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm /Michael Frew. So just reach out to me there. Not selling anything, just trying to kind of bring this awareness out. I feel like trying to catch Michael Frew from 10, 15 years ago where I didn't know this was a career option. And I just wish I did at the time. And so anything I can do to help, just reach out. And yeah, michaelfrew.com is probably the easiest way to find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and we'll call that a show.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between 5 million and 30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace. how to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.